However, there was considerable mopping up to be done, as many of the enemy had hidden, among other places, in drainage ditches along the runways of the airstrip. The Japs harassed our troops from these positions until captured or destroyed. The hangar and enemy planes on Burlesque were thoroughly destroyed by naval and air fire. Only the twisted, charred steel frame and occasional strips of corrugated sheet metal remained. Those enemy planes which were caught in the open were reduced to battered wrecks and worthless hulks, prey for the souvenir hunters. Burlesque was officially reported secured at 0800, 2 February, D+2, just 20 hours after landing. Simultaneously with the landing of the 23rd Marines, Combat Team 24 landed at 1200 on beaches Green 1 and Green 2 of Camouflage. Resistance was light along the beaches, but grew heavier as our troops moved inland. However, by 1330, the troops which had landed on Beach Green 1 were close to the 01 line. Those troops which had landed on Beach Green 2 were held up about 100 to 300 yards inland. Trouble was coming from a blockhouse. Our troops discovered this building was bristling with small arms and machine guns. After severe treatment, the command post was destroyed, and the advance continued. When Combat Team 24 reached the 01 line at about 1400, the 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines was ordered to camouflage for a coordinated attack to secure the islands. This attack jumped off at 1630. Shortly after 1700, D+1, the advance command post of the 4th Marine Division was set up about 100 yards inland of Beach Green 2. General Schmidt assumed command ashore at 1820. The 24th Marines had reached a line which ran along Nectar Street on the left, 100 yards from the edge, extending down to Sycamore Boulevard on the right, near the center of Camouflage Island. A tremendous explosion of enemy ammunition took place during the afternoon of D+1. The concussion rocked ships stationed 1,000 yards from the shore. Some of our missing men are believed to have been victims of this explosion. At 1847, Japs were resisting in blockhouses on the northeastern portion of the island. The enemy also were reportedly occupying trenches north of Narcissus Road at the northeast corner of the island. At daybreak, 24th Marines resumed the attack and advanced slowly against moderate to strong enemy resistance, which took place on the north end of the island. Medium tanks supported the advance. At 10:15, the two advancing Marine battalions joined upon reaching the north coast, thus surrounding the resistance which remained in that area. By 1300 on D+2 days, Camouflage was secured. It had taken 25 hours from the landing time. The Corps Ordnance Party landed on Camouflage on D+2 day and was requested by the Chief of Staff, 4th Marine Division, to empty a large magazine which contained some 400 tons of unfused Japanese bombs. Some 40 Japanese had taken shelter in the basement of the magazine, and it was feared they might detonate the magazine, causing an explosion similar to the one which occurred the afternoon of D+1 day. All but 7 of the Japanese in the basement of the magazine committed suicide, the remainder being taken prisoners on D+3 day. Phase 3 was begun at approximately 0800 2 February, D+2, by Combat Team 25. By 1545, Alton, Allen, Alvin, Anthony, Andrew, and Anton Islands had been seized without opposition. By 2117, the same night, all the islands in the east chain, to include Arlington, had been seized, and Hubert was secured in the west chain. By 1105, 3 February, the west chain, to include Hollis Island, had been captured. This completed Phase 3. There remained only to be seized the rest of the small islands in the western chain. This operation was labeled Phase 4 and Phase 5. On 7 February, the capture of Kwajalein Atoll was completed with the seizure of Compton Island. The attack forces were replaced by garrison troops. An enemy bombing raid took place on Burlesque 12 February at about 0230. Fires resulting from hits in the dispersal area destroyed approximately 80% of the rations on hand and 20% of the construction equipment. With the successful completion of all forces achieved, the following recapitulation of comprehensive data from incomplete enemy casualty and prisoner reports was made. Prior to invasion, it was estimated that the northern part of the Kwajalein Atoll was populated by 2,700 to 3,100 Japanese personnel and 400 to 600 Korean laborers. Japs captured totaled 99. Koreans captured 165. Enemy dead 3,472. Ratio of enemy dead to our dead, 28 to 1. Ratio of enemy non-effectives, prisoners of war and dead, to our non-effectives, killed, wounded, and missing, 5.5 to 1. The enemy suffered total casualty. Our own and enemy dead were sprayed with sodium arsenate, wrapped in ponchos and buried. To make identification certain, our dead were fingerprinted before burial. The Flintlock operation was completed in a great victory for our combined forces. The lessons learned from first attacks on coral atolls proved invaluable. Recommendations made and acted upon by this Corps as a result of the Gilberts proved sound. While Burlesque and Camouflage Islands were better fortified than Porcelain, the sighting of weapons was premised on an attempted landing from the north or seaward side. One battery of 2 5-inch dual-mount, dual-purpose guns was situated on the northwest corner of Burlesque, and a like battery on the most northerly point of Camouflage. Each battery, as those at Porcelain, was provided with a third emplacement prepared to receive weapon. These gun positions differed from those of the same caliber found elsewhere in that the guns were mounted at the natural ground level and surrounded with revetment walls 6 feet in height. Each revetment was provided with 8 equally spaced chambers designed for the temporary storage of 12 rounds. The main magazine for each of these batteries, 150 yards from the guns and connected thereto by narrow gauge trackage, was a reinforced concrete structure. On Burlesque were found 5 German-type blockhouses, 2 on the west and 3 on the north shore. These bunkers of heavily reinforced concrete, 40 feet in diameter, with walls 4 feet thick on the seaward side, mounted 4 13mm guns in separate chambers, provided with stepped embrasures, equipped with 7/16-inch steel closure plates. In the central portion of the blockhouse was a reinforced concrete magazine surmounted by a platform, from which an observer was able to peer through slits in a small steel turret extending 24 inches above the roof of the bunker proper. This type of blockhouse, constructed of Class A 8,000-pound concrete, would require for its silencing fire from naval guns, 155mm guns, or bombs of not less than 1,000 pounds. The quality of the concrete in these Japanese works was a little better than that found at Porcelain. On both Burlesque and Camouflage were found numerous air raid shelters, all of reinforced concrete and similar in design to those at Porcelain. The principal difference being that these, as well as all other concrete works on these 2 islands, were erected with floors at natural ground level and with little or no camouflage. Here, too, heavier concrete shelters were in process of construction on the target date. On the northwestern portion of Camouflage, the enemy had 2 tankettes. Neither was employed, though one housed a sniper. As at Porcelain, most of the small pillboxes, rifle pits, and wire entanglements were almost entirely destroyed. 300 yards of effective tank ditch were found on the northeast shore of Camouflage. In the heavily wooded area in the north-central portion of Camouflage, a maze of fire and communication trenches made the destruction of the enemy here difficult and slow. Tactical and general information was gained from captured documents which were translated on the spot. High-priority documents were forwarded to command ships for immediate air transportation to Pearl Harbor. Hydrographic information, defense installations, and disposition of enemy personnel was gained. Interrogation of Jap prisoners of war also revealed tactical and general information. The importance of such information can be estimated from the fact that in one instance, such information resulted in naval gunfire being laid on an enemy command post within 10 minutes after the prisoner had been questioned. A general feeling of discontent was apparent among the units stationed in Burlesque Camouflage area. Both Korean and Jap prisoners of war indicated there was bad feeling between the civilians and the military because the Korean laborers were paid more than the Jap enlisted military personnel. Another Jap prisoner of war said that the troops lacked confidence in their equipment, much of which was obsolete and in need of replacement. Dissatisfaction also was expressed relative to a shortage of pilots and incompetent, drunken troop officers. One Japanese prisoner of war was convinced that the marshals were being abandoned by the Japs because of the shipment of Jap civilians and technical workers from Jabor back to Japan, and also because of the lack of troop reinforcements of the marshals' area. However, despite this information, enemy troops fought as fanatically as ever and in most cases resisted to the death. The natives all appeared friendly and were cooperative. On Burlesque and Camouflage, little concealment was used by the enemy. Revetments and gun emplacements on Burlesque were so clearly visible on aerial photographs that they might stand almost as monuments to either carelessness, ineptitude, or both. However, evidence was found that a hurried attempt had been made to camouflage the emplacements. Regarding concealment measures adopted by our own troops, there is little to be said. Both the Gilbert and Flintlock operations indicate that no elaborate precautions are necessary or feasible on the attack. The use of the camouflage helmet cover was practical. Most of our troops wore the mottled green side out, whereas in atoll fighting, the mottled brown and sand-colored side out would have been more effective. Many troops offset the advantage of the colored helmet by wearing clean, light-colored web belting, which showed in sharp contrast to their green dungarees. The dungarees, when wet from sea spray or sweat, assumed a much darker tone, and thus presented a better target than the original green. There is also a tendency to shed the coat because it is so uncomfortably hot for tropical wear in cases where there is no shade. A liberal use of green face paint was noted and approved. Some of our troops painted their faces but neglected their hands. On the beach, several instances of the magic net theory were noted. The mere throwing of a net over a vehicle does not conceal either its presence or shape. The straight lines must be broken. Also, the use of nets garlanded with dark green strips of cloth when used on a startlingly bright coral beach is to be avoided. Observations on the training of troops indicated considerable carelessness in the handling of duds. One example reported showed that 10 Marines had been injured while playing catch with a 37-millimeter dud. A considerable number of Marines were seen searching for souvenirs, although it is not known that any casualties resulted from this habit. It was necessary to issue an order prohibiting the detonating of duds on camouflage due to their proximity to Marine Corps personnel. Such duds as were found were removed by hand and disposed of in deep water. The plan of execution of the attack on Kwajalein Atoll emphasized two principal factors which led to the capture of the main objectives with a minimum of casualties. The first of these was the seizure of weakly defended islands adjacent to the main enemy positions, and the use of 3 islands for the emplacement of artillery to support the principal landings. Once the artillery was landed on these adjacent islands, it supported the principal landings and continued close support of the troops throughout the operation. The second consisted of prolonged and intensive naval gunfire and air bombardment on all principal islands of the atoll before the landing. The naval vessels of the Northern Attack Force shelled its objectives with slightly more than 2,667 tons of explosives. Because of excellent coordination between land, air, and naval forces, the atoll was captured with dispatch and with comparatively few casualties. As a result of the foregoing facts, intelligence listed the following conclusions. 1. That the bold conception of the Flintlock operation to land in the very heart of the Marshalls, bypassing the heavily fortified atolls on the eastern fringe of the group, caught the enemy off balance and ill-prepared to withstand an attack in force. 2. That the absence of underwater obstacles and mines, effective anti-tank barriers, extensive barbed wire entanglements, artillery in adequate quantity, and suitable designed and erected fortifications all point to the fact that the enemy had not expected surface attacks other than raids. 3. That the great number of air raid shelters completed and those in process of construction indicated that repeated bombing raids were expected. 4. That any raid on Kwajalein Atoll was expected at Burlesque Camouflage with a landing on the seaward side. 5. With the exception of small, easily repulsed and unorganized counterattacks at night, supported in one instance by some artillery fire, the only verified use of artillery, A few ineffective night infiltrations, AA fire on one of our attacking bombers, and the use of mortars on one occasion, the Jap defense at Caroline was entirely passive. Hardly defense in the military sense. It is better described as an unorganized resistance with small arms, which had to be bombed, burned, blasted, or dug out. In short, the conquest of Caroline has shown the Jap unable to cope with a better prepared and better equipped enemy who could choose the time and place for his attack.